The final game of Wild Card weekend, Monday night, Minnesota Vikings and the LA Rams. I would have said Vikings on the road at the LA Rams, but this game has been moved over to Glendale, Arizona. Hearts and thoughts and prayers and all the stuff, whatever you guys do for good juju and everything for all the guys over in California. Just absolutely brutal, heartbreaking stuff to see over there. And so the Rams have to move this game that would have been a home game. They earned a home game under the current playoff system over to a neutral field in Arizona. So with that, the line, Mo, moves from about 1 in favor of the Vikings out to 2.5 in favor of the Vikings. We've actually seen a couple of threes now pop at Fanatics and ESPN bet. 47.5 to 48 is our total. So we now know home field advantage for the Rams is worth a point, maybe a 1.5, essentially, because that's what this line moves. It was sitting about 1.5. It moves over and sitting there at 2.5 as we sit right now. What say you here, Vikings and Rams?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. I'm super curious what happens with this line if there's any further movement, because somebody was pounding the Rams who had a lot of market influence. I mean, they moved from I even saw some Rams -1s when they were +2.5 at open. Mm-hmm. So someone with market influence loved the Rams. They were all in on the Rams. Obviously, those bets all get voided. I'm very curious to see what happens with this line. I think it's curious and interesting and kind of odd. The Vikes open -2.5 on a neutral when they were -2.5 in LA to start.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Mo, and I know we're doing this hypothetical deal and whatever. And so I actually played a Vikings one and I played it at MGM, so it got voided. By the way, tickets at DraftKings and FanDuel are all good, so you guys don't have to worry about those. MGM, Caesars voided out those tickets and whatnot. And the reason for me is I kind of looked at it like this, and you answer me this question, maybe I was just off. So let's say the Vikings didn't get owned by the Lions, and let's say that the Lions just kicked a walk-off field goal as opposed to kind of dominating the majority of that second half against this Vikings team, and that kind of was the lasting memory of the last time we saw the Vikings team. What does this open up? Doesn't this open at 2.5, 3 or something? Is it really 1.5? I don't know. I felt like maybe the Vikings were getting a tiny bit of disrespect off of that marquee last game of the year. Everybody's watching it, whatever. And that's the last taste in our mouth of that Vikings team, which was kind of laying an egg against, what might end up being the best team in the NFL. And it's all said, the Lions might win the Super Bowl for all we know. So I don't know. I thought maybe there was a tiny bit of overreaction.
Yeah, I have that exact thing in my notes. I'm with you. I think the Vikes are a better team. I think there's probably some buy low here after, like you said, a poor national TV performance. Darnold should bounce back. We saw him miss multiple throws. We know this is a much weaker Rams defense than what the Lions have trotted out there. At least if you look at the season-long numbers. I don't know if that's true. It's hard to say at this point. But, yeah, overall, statistically, Lions much better than the Rams. I would expect Darnold to play better. I'm just holding my Rams futures ticket and praying there's something to that, but I am with you on that. I do think the Rams legitimately kicked their asses last time these teams played. Mm-hmm. So they dominated the Vikes. I don't know if that was Lions hangover and that was just a no-show or what the deal was there. I think this might be a live betting game for me, or I would recommend it because I really think this game boils down to just one thing, and that's, are the Vikings blitzes getting home? Mm-hmm. We know what Brian Flores wants to do. We know they have had success more often than not. Matt Stafford cannot move anymore. We have seen that the last 2 years. For fun, I looked up Matt Stafford's PFF rating when kept clean versus under pressure. I didn't even know the grades went this low. He has a 29.4. I had to triple check to make sure that I had the right sample size, and I wasn't looking at one game or something. Right. He has a 29.4 grade under pressure and a 92 grade clean.
Yeah.
I think that generally matches up with what we've been seeing with Stafford the last 2 years, which is he can't deal with any bad pockets and he can't run anymore. So if he can plant his feet and fire, yeah, he's probably in decent shape. But I thought that was basically I liked the Vikes in the previous matchup. I don't even remember if I bet it or not, but I remember leaning that way, and I was stunned that they were able to hold off these blitzes. So I don't know if they're going to be able to do that again. I'm very, very fascinated to see. But I think if you just watch the first few drives and you're like, okay, they're picking up all these blitzes, Stafford has the throws that he wants. Even if the Rams are up 10-7 or something, if it's like Rams minus 1.5, I think that might be okay at that point.
I look at one of the things that I'm going to kind of see here, and if I know this stat, then certainly Brian Flores knows this stat. It's so Stafford, when blitzed this year, has thrown to Puka Nacua on 45% of the throws. Like nearly half of the throws when he's been blitzed, he's thrown to Puka Nacua. So it's just like, oh my God, here comes an extra guy, and he's just throwing to Puka Nacua. Like, I mean, it's like auto, right? Brian, if I know this and Brian Flores knows this, like, is this a deal where Brian Flores is like, we're going to bring the heat, but we're going to try to take away Nacua when we bring the heat and make him like do something that he doesn't want to do? And then in that situation, Mo, now you have a guy who's bad anyway under this, and now you're taking away the one thing he really wants to do, and now he's freaking out. It's like, oh no, now I've got to go elsewhere with all of this. I do wonder with that. So that's something I'm going to kind of try to watch early on as well, because if he's not able to get the ball out and get the ball out quick to Nacua, then it might be a really long day for Stafford in this Rams team. I like the Vikings anyway. I mean, like, I'm just more saying this as if I end up wanting to pile on somewhere along the game. Like I said, I bet the 1, it got voided. I came back and bet a 2. There was a 2 here in town until it got to 2.5. I bet the 2, so I have 1 point less, than I had on the original bet. But overall, to me, I guessed this at 3. Like, I guessed this line at 3 whenever I was kind of like figuring out what I thought this was going to open at. And so when it opened less than that, I obviously, with 3 being the keyest of key numbers, I found a lot of value on that. And I just can't help but think that if the Lions walk it off with a 37-yard field goal and they win the North and they get the number 1 seed, but it's like, oh, the Vikings were right there to the end, that this wouldn't have opened at a field goal. I don't know. I mean, I can't say it for certain. No one can say it for certain. I think that the difference in most people's power ratings between the Vikings and the Rams would have put this closer to a field goal than it was. So that's why I ended up where I ended up. I don't know. And let's talk about this. And we're not being heartless bastards here, but let's talk about this. Do you take into account at all that these people's lives have been messed up, right, for the last week, and that whether it's their home or not, certainly it's someone they know, it's whatever, it's the state that they reside in at least half the year, and all of this stuff. Like, I know it's hard to handicap emotion and all of that, but I also do find it hard to believe that you've been able to keep your mind 100% on the task at hand when something like this, as devastating as this, is going on.
Yeah, you always wonder, but then, I mean, that sort of thing can help motivate you as well. So, you never know. My understanding from talking to Rich, our buddy, who, is over in California, he's saying none of this area that they live in or practice in or anything was remotely affected really by any of this. So maybe it's something close to out of sight, out of mind. I don't know how dialed in these guys are to whatever's happening. Yeah. So it's really hard to say, like you said.
Yeah.
But overall, really weird situation, obviously playing in a neutral venue. Could see a lot of Vikings fans there. Maybe even more Vikings fans. I mean,
I think so for sure. Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see this be like more Vikings fans than Rams fans, because
less travel.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were like, again, this is like, this is a sports betting podcast that we're doing. So I don't want anyone to think that like I'm talking out of line here and all this. I am bringing up the facts here, which is it's pretty hard to justify like going to a football game when you're dealing with all, you know what I'm saying? Like all of this other stuff that's like going on. And so I don't know how well the Rams are really going to travel here from a fan perspective. So it would not surprise me at all to see this feel like a Vikings, kind of like a Vikings majority crowd in this one, because for them, it's as easy as switching a flight for the ones that were already coming, and then the ones that maybe this is like a reason for more people to come, whatever. It's Phoenix, I can go play golf or so, I don't know. So it wouldn't surprise me to see this be like a lot of purple in the stands. Yeah,
that's probably more likely. So maybe this line should have moved more than it did based on where it was. I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning was behind the Rams love initially. I'm hoping it's right. Like I said, still holding a 30-1 NFC ticket. Not feeling great about it, but hey, I mean, they're still basically in a coin flip first round, so I can't be too mad.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I look at this one, that 47.5, somewhat interesting. Like you said, I think we see a much, much better performance from this Vikings offense. And if the blitz doesn't get home, I'll put it this way: it's not in the account. I would lean toward. I'd rather go over here than I would go under. I think Minnesota has every bit of a chance to put up mid to high 20s, given that I think the offense certainly rebounds here against a worse defense in the Rams. And then, like you mentioned, if the blitz is not getting home, then Stafford should be able to move the ball too on this team. So it's more over than under for me. What would be a lean for you from a total standpoint?
The same. Yeah. I was tempted to pull the trigger on the over here at 47.5. But yeah, my fears are just basically around how poor the Rams offense has. The passing game has not been good for. They've had one good game in like 6 weeks. Yeah. I mean, it hasn't been a good run for this offense. So I'm just being scared off by how they've looked. But everything in theory is telling me this number should be like 50. But yeah, it's still a very good Vikings defense. So maybe they can control the game that way as well.